background and how I got started in community organizing. I was already pastoring on the south side of Chicago. I'd been pastoring an older congregation. I was 28 years old. And most of my parishioners were 60 and over. Maybe 10, 20% of them about in their 40s. But most of them were 60 and over. The church had a reputation of having no children. And they brought a 28-year-old guy in here to pastor, right? Now, I don't know if that was, their way of organizing the community, but for a year, I really sat because our church had moved and migrated into a neighborhood that it had not come up from. And they had been there 10 years and never really connected with the neighborhood. So there was no real sense of community in the church. They would come in on Sunday, leave, come back on Wednesday for prayer meeting, turn all the lights off, shut the locks, and not show up again until Sunday. Invariably, they could come in on Sunday and someone would have sprayed graffiti on the back of the church or the garage, or someone would have broken in and stolen the PA system, or windows were broken. Couldn't keep silverware in the building because they'd break in and steal it. And so I thought that we needed to get in and make a real connection with the people who live there, because it wasn't outside folks coming to break into the church. They considered the church to be outsiders. And so we needed to connect with the community. And one day I was sitting in my office trying to brainstorm about how to get more involved, how to get my older congregation, who really were getting ready to retire, not just from their jobs, but from Christian work. Somebody will get that later. And a young man walked up and rang the doorbell and said, "Pastor, can I talk to you for a few moments?" And he was, dressed in some khaki pants and some loafers, and had a shirt on with his sleeves rolled up. And at first I thought he wanted to borrow $5, and so I started not to have to open the door, but I let him in, and he said, "My name is Barack Obama, and I'm out here trying to organize a community, and I'd like to talk to you for a few moments about community organizing." And so he came in and he told me his story, because he knew his name was going to throw some flags up. And so he told me his story right away. He says, "My name is Obama. Folks have trouble with that name. It's not Muslim." He said, "I know you're wondering where I got this funny accent from. My mother's from Kansas." And he said, "Folks call me Alabama. They call me Yo Mama, but it's Obama." And but that 5-minute meeting that he requested ended up being an hour-and-a-half conversation with me doing most of the talking. He asked me what did I think was important in the neighborhoods? What would I like to see done? How would I like to get, or would I like to get more engaged? And I'm sitting there all the time, and I'm talking because I'm wondering, how can I get my church involved? And right away, someone walks right up and says, "How would you like to get involved?" Now, I'd been at our church. I'm a Baptist pastor. I'd been there for a year and a half, had not met one of the Catholic priests in my neighborhood. And in one meeting, following that meeting with our community organizer, I met all 6 of the Catholic priests in my neighborhood. They didn't know me. I didn't know them. I knew very few other pastors in my neighborhood who were not African-American Baptists. All right? Because sometimes even in the church, we put up these boundaries that say denomination. Boundaries that say, my particular parish or my particular neighborhood. And so we don't get involved unless it affects our parish or the people who are in our church. Not realizing that many of them are related to folks, many of the folks in my church are related to the people in yours. And they all have the same issues. And so we had the opportunity to sit down, and that very first time sitting down, I discovered that there were other pastors in the neighborhood who were having the same kind of issues that I had. People were breaking into their churches. They were having difficulties with graffiti. gang violence and all those things. And so we began to sit down and brainstorm. What happened was that among us as pastors, we developed a relationship one with the other. So building community starts with developing long-term relationships. Everybody has the things that they think are most important, but if all of us can sit down and get to know why the other person thinks it's important and understand where they're coming from, we can move together. And so community organizing begins, again, this is my simplistic definition. I'll leave it to Dr. Tom to give you the detailed one. It begins with organizing. It's about organizing community, building long-term relationships. When you do that, you begin to find out what's available in terms of both resources and people power within that community. Right? And that's capacity building, but it's understanding the resources that we have within our group. We identify what we can. One of the things that I learned, and it's helped me in ministry, is that there really is in the community as it is in the church, really 3 levels of capacity. There's always this idea of what should be done, right? Of course, we all have to come to an understanding and an agreement as to what that is. That's why we build relationships. When it comes to the church, we've got the Great Commission that tells us what should be done. All right? All right. But after what should be done, there's another level. And that level is what can be done. That's when we look at the resources among us and we see who we have with us and who's willing or who's able. Let me use that word first. Who's able to do certain things, all right? That's the level of what can be done. So we go from what should be done. And I found out that most community meetings, we spend most of our time arguing over what should be done. And when everybody has had their opportunity to complain about what should be done, we go home and we feel content because I told them. I let them have it. I gave them a piece of my mind. I told them they ought to do this, this, and this, and I go home and I feel good. And the problem still exists. When we build relationships, we understand. I get to know that Dr. Tom can talk about what organizing is, all right? And Angelique can put a meeting together. And we learn each other's ability, and so we know what can be done. But where the rubber meets the road is the level of what will be done, all right? And that's when each one of us, as stakeholders in the community, as persons who are interested in making our community better, who are willing to step up and take responsibility for it. All right? Everybody knows that violence in the community ought to cease. All of us agree that our young people ought to stop dying, and they shouldn't be shot down by other young people. All right? We know that should be done. We may have some disagreements about what can be done because we may not know the resources among us. That's why we need to build relationships. But who really is willing to spend some time dealing with some wayward young boys or young ladies and dealing with the gangbangers and the gun dealers, or dealing with the economic conditions that cause them to go out on the street and sell drugs and then have to protect their territory because they have no other resources. They feel they have no other ways to make a living. Right? So who's willing to get out there and provide other opportunities or let them know that there's another way? That's really where the rubber meets the road when it comes to community organizing. So there's what should be done, what can be done, but where our real work is what will be done.